Welcome to Ask the Expert on Contingent Workforce Strategies LinkedIn group. I'm Jeff Nugent, and I've got a fantastic conversation today with an amazing person who has seen so much in her career. And it's a topic that is very near and dear to a lot of programs' hearts. Because, going to a few of the conferences, I'm seeing a lot of new faces that are starting out their programs. They've been given a mandate and they're saying, hey, let's centralize that. And that usually comes with the economic times. When there's a downturn, people look to cost save or streamline processes. And the contingent workforce is a huge expense for most organizations. So talking about the topic from chaos to control, navigating the growing pains of starting a first generation contingent program, and then moving towards and unlocking the secrets of moving towards a second generation program and creating more value for your organization. And I couldn't have a better person for this. Like I say, she's been in the industry for almost over 15 years. She's worked both on the vendor side at Zero Chaos and Volt. She's been currently at Snowflake for 4.5 years, which, in the history of Snowflake, they've expanded and grown as an organization and evolved, and it's amazing to see that. And previous to that, she ran the programs at Airbnb and ServiceNow. So we got Natalie Javid here, and I thank you for your time.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Jeff. I'm so excited to be with you today and have this conversation. And like you said, the last CWS that I went to, I believe the stat said 33% of the folks attending the conference this year were within the space from the past 2 to 3 years. So that's an incredible amount of newcomers to this space.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they're either been given a mandate to try to wrangle in the chaos and streamline process and save money, or they've inherited some other beast from somebody that they've got to build the strategy to bring it to the next generation. So can you talk a little bit about your background on, how you got into managing contingent workforce programs, and throughout your evolution of your career, what departments have you been in as well? So just to give some context as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, first of all, like most of us, I really didn't grow up thinking that one day I was going to lead an organization's contingent workforce. That wasn't, what I was writing in my diary when I was a kid. But, my journey really started when I was going to school. I had an opportunity fall into my lap while I was going to school to make a little bit of extra money. And that was by way of Volt Workforce Solutions.
Right.
And, I once I landed the gig, I really found out, okay, I've got a knack for it. This is something that I can do. It's interesting. There's absolutely never a dull moment in what we do. And over the years, we see this is just things are constantly evolving. And it really wasn't, too long after being there that I made some key relationships with coworkers, which is how I was recommended to Zero Chaos. And that was where I began to manage LinkedIn's contingent workforce program. That was really a pivotal moment in my career because it shaped how I approach work, and it really set the standard for what I expect from myself and influenced what I expect from others. That program set the bar. I mean, that really is where I grew up. And one of the biggest lessons I always just like to reflect on from my time supporting the LinkedIn program was one of their core values of relationships matter. And really that principle opened the door to several opportunities throughout my career. And so, as you mentioned, I've also managed contingent workforce programs and strategies at ServiceNow, Airbnb, now Snowflake, and all of those roles, except for ServiceNow, came to me through my relationships, which is really a testament to the power of networking. So we should never underestimate the power of relationships. And
It is amazing. Yeah, it is just amazing the power of the relationships and your network. And over time, how important building trust with people are. It's such a trust-based industry. Given that we're managing people's pay and their jobs and helping them find jobs, so it's really an important industry. And because of that, as an organization, you want ambassadors to be the face of your organization. So it's knowing that you can trust the people and the vendors you're working with is so important.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's really critical. And all of those programs within every organization that I've sat on in internally has been within HR. So I've never gone to the dark side of procurement. No, I'm just
Hey, I'll say it's the dark side, yeah.
I'm so I've always sat within the HR organization, which I've had great partners in procurement. I couldn't get the work done without having those key partnerships. But yes, it's always come from the angle and lens of HR. And yeah, it's been
Which is
ingrained.
amazing because you're seeing the industry evolve to that, to a certain respect. It's managed, either side, it could be managed in procurement or it could be managed in HR and talent. And like you say, you have to have a partnership between the two types of departments and skills. So if it is held in HR, you got to have a great partnership with procurement or have procurement skills within the HR function and vice versa. Now, as we've evolved, to direct sourcing and a focus on the talent experience, it really is starting to evolve to that HR and talent side of things and experience as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting that you grew up in that realm and have just innately seen that and seen it as not only the talent experience, but building relationships with the talent that are coming in, going out of your organization, and then you want to attract them back, right? So it's so important.
Truly, truly. So
That's so cool. So, first generation programs can be tricky. And often it's either an operations group or a specific department that has high usage of independent contractors and temporary workers, or that are saying, hey, come in and help us save money, streamline process, find better talent, etc. Or there's a mandate of an internal group like an HR department or procurement. What were some of the stakeholders involved in some of your early first generation programs?
yes, so some of the key stakeholders had been, folks within HR compliance specifically. We've got folks from the procurement teams, and those were the teams that I always would initially begin working with when we were starting to drive those conversations. And the interest, to really implement were typically around compliance and having full visibility. So there's many other key stakeholders that I work with and engaged with throughout the implementation process. But up front, it usually was leadership within HR, leadership within procurement, some folks obviously in legal as well. I guess I should throw our legal friends into the conversation because they play a key role and ties right back into compliance that we're keeping the organization safe.
Yeah, and it's interesting with that being a lot of it visibility and compliance being a big ROI driver. And I think we're coming back to that again with changes in regulations, remote work, and a global talent pool has kind of distributed the visibility that you once had. And we were talking about this earlier too, the statement of work areas. When you have a mature program often, or you start putting policy in place, all of a sudden, if a manager or an operations group feels that that might be restrictive to their programs, all of a sudden a statement of work that is out of scope of the program may pop up over here, even though it smells like, looks like, and could fall under the scope of the program. And so interestingly, I think we're swinging back now because of that trend towards potentially avoidance of the program, operationally, that now has now swung that, oops, this is causing risk for our organization. We better take a look at the statement of work group and other things like that, and compliance being the main driver of that.
Absolutely. And I mean, when I talk about the different stakeholders that we engage with, initially, we start engaging with them and really want to inform them of the upcoming changes and make sure in particular that the various different stakeholders are aware of our timelines, because it's critical that I've got their time allocated for, and they've got resources allocated to support the implementation process. So I just wanted to, circle back to the various different stakeholders. And we even pulled in some of our stakeholders in the VMS selection process, really in particular to help evaluate the integration capabilities and just ensure that it was going to be a seamless change and transition when we move from one system to another, and that felt seamless for all parties involved.
Yeah, that's so essential to not disrupt the business and what's going on day to day as you're changing processes. And it's so important to engage to understand what the current process is, what priorities and timing is going on in their world that you may be disrupting as well. That may put a stop to your program if you're not treading lightly. So that whole idea of engaging all of your stakeholders and listening to their timelines, their priorities, different things like that is often helpful in gaining adoption and engaging with the stakeholders so they see what the value you're bringing by implementing a program.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't say how many peers that I've spoken with that really didn't have resources from the different key stakeholders allocated to an implementation that delayed their timeline because, we've got our day jobs. There's a lot of things going on. People aren't anticipating how many of our hours of work it's going to take to get your implementation live. And also, when you talk about making it seamless for the end users, I also am thinking about our subject matter experts behind the scenes, right? Who, when things go wrong, they're the ones triaging the mess and trying to fix it. So sometimes the end user has no idea what's going on. It's just behind the scenes where these teams are getting pulled in, trying to, troubleshoot and resolve issues so that those end users don't know what's happening.
Yeah, it's funny because it's both a service industry, and then there's technology components to create the efficiencies and do tracking, analytics, all that sort of thing. And it's a matter of making sure that the service potentially in some cases covers up the slow, either the slow implementation when it comes to technology or some of the issues that come into that integration work with different systems. Because once again, I think why we all caught this contingent workforce bug is so many balls in the air and it's so complex. And you got to keep smiling and make sure that talent gets on the projects on time to do the projects, even though maybe the technology is not fully implemented yet or needs to be reconfigured or whatever the case may be. So it's always fascinating to keep that smile and the service and the process going, even though it's not exactly what we designed at the beginning of the discussions of the implementation.
Yep, exactly.
So, how did you identify all of your workers that would have been in scope, especially in the early days? And let's take your current organization. Often when you're first generation, it's chaotic and it's the wild, wild west with contracts and or lack of contracts and standardization of process. Rates are all over the board, etc. And let's use your current situation, but also reflect back on other organizations. How did you bring everybody together and start to move in the direction of what you were looking for and mandated to do in centralizing things and automating the processes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I'm trying to get visibility and figure out, okay, who has access, who are the non-employees here, and then, trying to classify them into the right buckets. I always start with our workplace services team. They can give you the information on who has badges, who's, accessing your sites, your locations. And then you also can work with your IT teams because they'll then give you system access information. So those are your buddies, right? Those are and you always want to make friends with those people first when you go into any organization, have them be your friends.
Yeah. I always said send the gift basket at Christmas down to information security, provisioning, and
Yeah,
the other friend is often accounts payable. So
yeah,
I find
exactly.
contractors and staffing firms identify themselves if their invoice isn't getting paid because you have to have a conversation about being compliant with the program with them. So they'll identify themselves quickly. So if you make friends in accounts payable, it often also helps finding the individuals that could fall into the scope of your program.
Well, exactly, because that's who I went to and tapped on the shoulder to say, hey, who are we paying releasing 1099s to at the end of the year? Give me that list. And of course, obviously, was able to work with our procurement team and get some contracts from them just to start looking at who we might have IC agreements in place with and things of that nature. But then with Snowflake, we were already leveraging our Workday system. And that is how all non-employees were being provisioned with Cider Systems access. So luckily, it was pretty easy for me to go directly there and also see, okay, this is who has site or systems access. So that was really helpful. But if you don't have that in place, then you got to start with, those other friends that we just mentioned.
Yeah. So, what were some of the ROI drivers? And when I say ROI, what's the return on investment? And there's usually some sort of a business case. And we talked about compliance, but were there some other ones that you've seen that also are what prompts moving towards a centralized program or even the evolution to the next generation, like a program, second generation program?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, compliance is always a factor. It's never sexy. Nobody ever wants to talk about compliance, but we have to do it. So one of the key drivers for sure. We wanted also visibility, right? We wanted to be able to see who we were working with, make sure that they were classified correctly. And then once we ensured that they were classified correctly, then we could start thinking about maybe cost savings, right? How are we going to centralize the vendor management and streamline our agreements to make sure that we were able to have everybody on the same terms and conditions? Our program is also markup driven, so we're not bill rate driven. And that way, we were able to make sure that and when I was digging in and we were having conversations with some of our, I should say, staffing partners
Yeah.
at the time, when we got in there and saw what they were charging us in terms of a markup, it was almost 100%. And this is where, you just really want to get in there and have more control, and that helps to drive cost savings. Obviously, again, this ties right back into compliance, but we wanted to have efficient IC screenings and making sure that, again, we were compliant. And just in general, one of the main drivers was a global streamlined process for our end users. They were looking for simplicity and efficiency,
Yeah.
and they wanted to be able to have the same process in the US as they were going to have in Singapore, as they were going to have in Poland, wherever it might be. They were really looking for one cohesive experience. And that was one of the main drivers as well. Um, we were looking to implement this first generation program. We knew we had to get all of the foundational components in place, and where the business is going to be a strategic lever and the ability, to come and leverage us, when when we start and we've been continuing to grow and scale, but whatever the needs might be as we're going into different countries, as we've got large hiring requirements, we wanted, them to know, hey, we've got these foundational components in place and we are that strategic lever. And of course, we've been able to measure different KPIs by rate compliance, looking at some of the cost savings metrics, time to fill metrics, user satisfaction. And then one of the biggest indicators has been program growth, because our program year over year has doubled in size. And if we weren't delivering to the business and we weren't meeting their needs, first of all, they're not going to come back. Like you said, right? If they feel like we're policing them, or we're not partnering with them, then all of a sudden we're going to see this SOW, the staff fog disguised as SOW, which we really haven't seen that. So I feel like those have been some of the really key metrics that we've been able to look at and measure the success.
No, that's incredible, because you often think, when you're starting out, you want to make a big impact and measure success with huge cost savings and things like that. But in some cases, it's just taking it slow, doing it right, listening to your stakeholders, and then it ramps up in time because you've done such a good job and you've made the relationships you needed to make. You've designed processes to streamline things and make it easier for the hiring managers, versus being the policing the managers. And so doing that is always, and then seeing the results in year over year growth, not just the expansion of your company and growth, but the adoption and people wanting to utilize your services because they know you're going to help them be quicker, faster, better at getting talent, better rates, provision quickly, and you're there to support the business versus police the business, which is incredible.
Exactly. I mean, we don't make any friends that way. And ultimately, in the years of being in this industry, I've really learned it's not so much about me and what Natalie wants. It's not about, that. It's really, we are here to serve the business. Like you said, we are service oriented. I could have, all of my great ideals and things that I'm passionate about, but in the end, it is what is driving the business needs and how can we support that? And if we're not supporting it, then I don't know, we're going to be out of a job pretty soon.
It's very interesting because I was on a number of conversations recently, and the idea of understanding your company and aligning what
Yes.
the program goals are to the goals of the company is so essential these days to really start to be strategic versus transactional. So it's amazing that you've seen that, and that's why I have a feeling you keep moving forward, and every time you ask for, hey, listen, I'm going to look at this and this next year to evolve the program, be it implement technology through a VMS, implement managed services, implement new EOR to help you consolidate directly sourced workers or pre-identified workers on a global basis. They've seen your success in the past in streamlining the processes, and there's trust built with those relationships that you're going to continue that. So, and then there's probably trust that you're going to select the right partners to be your ambassadors, which is amazing. So as always, I think we could talk for hours and hours on this. The passion that you have for this industry is just jumping through the screen here. But we got to end this. And I always end off with, what advice would you give to program leaders that are either just, starting a program from first gen, or looking that have inherited the program and looking to upgrade it to that generation 2.0 or 3.0?
Yeah, no, definitely. So for those just starting a program, I think it's really important to define your objective early on. what are your key priorities? And those are going to be your drivers, right? And then ideally, you'll probably be aligning with those stakeholders within your organization to help push forward your business case. So define those objectives early on. And then what we were just also alluding to, understand your organizational goals and the vision, right? And how are you going to be helping to tie back into those? We already talked about it as well. Engage the stakeholders early on. I didn't go through the list of all the different stakeholders, but there are so many, from HR, IT, legal, um, employee communications, so many different stakeholders
Yeah.
that are involved in any implementation. Go and start listening to them, learning from them, understand what their pain points are. That's also going to help you with your business case. And make sure you've got the right partners, right? Selecting the right partners, but also, again, when you go back to what your objectives are, that will help you understand what you need to buy, right? So sometimes we can get caught up and we overbuy. So really having those clear objectives will help you understand who your partners should be and then vet them properly with your procurement team. Prioritize change management.
Oh,
It
yeah.
is not a simple task, right? You want to make sure that you are overly communicating and that you've got all of the right parties that have been informed and consulted with. Go back to your RACI and, make sure that you've captured everyone. Find those metrics that you can measure success, what we've already been discussing. And then I think it's really critical to make sure that you have a strong project manager whenever you do get started. You need that dedicated person. I mean, typically, whatever partner you choose, they're going to have a manager
Yeah.
assigned to the implementation. But if you can get one internally, I would highly recommend that. Oftentimes, internally, the way we might want to manage a project is somewhat different than how one of our partners would want
Yeah.
and not want to, but even just how they manage a project. So I highly recommend that, and make sure that you've got a really good decision tracker, because let me tell you, I don't know how many times I've said, "Hey, why did we make that decision?" I know we made that
Yeah.
decision. What was the reasoning behind it again?
Yeah. And well, with so many moving parts,
Yeah,
and a lot of the decisions go into the next decision. And if you know what happened in the past, even though you should probably remember what happened last week, but it's one of those things. It is crazy when all the balls in the air are flying around. It's important to have that, and it's good to document it, because there are conversations you've had with different vendors that aren't in the SLA official document or in the contracts that you need to have some conversations about, to say who's responsible for that, especially if you're running a complex program where there's lots of partners that could do a lot of this finger pointing at each other, where you want to have it documented who said what, who's responsible for what, so that you go forward and you can look back on that too and say, you said this on this date. And usually it allows for easy, oh yeah, that's right, and move forward in the process.
exactly. When you've got especially multiple partners and you want to make sure you've got alignment, alignment, alignment. And I can't stress that enough. And then for folks who are looking, to upgrade their program, take it to that next level, what are your current gaps? Figure out what those are. Conduct a thorough review of your program and identify the areas for improvement. And do you have the right technology in place? What is your focus? Are you looking at total talent management? Do your end users have a good experience? So these are some of the things to consider. I mean, we can also always look at different trends. What are the market shifts that might be occurring? And maybe our programs need a little bit of a shakeup to factor in some of those trends. Maybe it's the right time for us. And then always, again, alignment with our stakeholders, just maintaining that alignment with the various stakeholders and ensuring that our program's goals and priorities are aligning with theirs and supporting the business. And then, so those are just some of the things I think if, folks are looking to take it to the next level, And when I think about partners too, it's like also thinking about, do I have the right partners to continue to grow and scale?
Yeah.
And that was a big, key driver for us, and why we made some changes earlier this year, because we wanted to make sure that we had the right partners as we continue to grow and scale our program to support a 21st century company that we believe is built to last and is going to be an iconic company.
Yeah, and there's so much transformation happening in the workforce, changes, AI. I'm not even going to go into the usage of AI because it's everybody's getting tired of hearing about it, but there's such change happening that to think strategically and always have, understanding what's going to happen and then start preparing for it now is what you have to look to as you build the foundation to transform. So I can't thank you enough, Natalie, for the amazing wisdom. You've seen some of the best programs and/or ran the best programs, organized the best programs, set the strategy for some of the best programs in our industry. So I really appreciate your time today in exuding your wisdom to the contingent workforce audience.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure being with you today, Jeff, and getting to talk through this.
Awesome. Thank you so much.